Lucy has joined. Okay, let us. Wonderful. So we'll just start with the session as we wait for people to join us on Facebook. So welcome to everyone that's listening in. Good evening to everyone listening in from the UK. Good morning to everyone tuning in from the other side of the world. Miombulare. As you know, tonight is part 2 of the Marama Alliance Intergenerational Dialogue series, and our focus will be on cultural resilience for the Fijian community here in the UK. Last week was part 1, where the young people aged 18 to 29 took part in a session that was very informative and well received by members of the community. And this is part 2, where we'll be joined by other Fijians from across the UK. I'm Philo. I'm Wananimbua Basuimbua. I'm a committee member of Marama Alliance UK, and I will be moderating tonight's session on behalf of the Marama Alliance Committee. Our session tonight will be with Group 2, and they are Fijians from around the UK, aged 30 to 49 years old. Tonight we'll be talking about their experiences as Fijians in the UK and how they maintain their culture and identity whilst living in the greater UK culture. As mentioned last week, we will be working along the same working definition of cultural resilience. So for the purpose of the series, the definition of cultural resilience that we will be discussing on is that cultural resilience is the capability of a cultural system consisting of cultural processes in relevant communities to absorb adversity, deal with change, and continue to develop. Cultural resilience thus implies both continuity and change. Disturbances that can be absorbed are not an enemy to be avoided, but a partner in the dance of cultural sustainability. This definition is adapted from Holt. Before we move into introducing our wonderful panelists, just a few housekeeping announcements. So as usual, as we go through the session, we always ask that viewers are kind and constructive in putting your views and questions across to panelists. And we thank you for keeping our lives, our discussions in Talanoa as a safe space and continuing to do so far. So thank you very much. Secondly, our session tonight will be done in the English language with a bit of the session, mainly the introductions, in the vernacular. The sole reason for this is for the sake of accessibility for those who may not be able to understand Fijian language as well, or who will struggle with it. So this is the main reason behind the choice of the language of the medium of communication. However, there is an upcoming project next month that will focus solely on the Fijian language, which will be around Fijian Language Week. And one of our panelists, Luisa, will elaborate more on that later on in the session. So that's all regarding our housekeeping matters. We'll now move into introducing our wonderful panelists. As you know, during our promotions and advertising this session, we have a wonderful lineup of panelists for you this evening. And I'll quickly introduce them before we get them to tell us more about themselves. So first up, we have Salote Sauturanga, Maramatau, Maramakanga Mai Naitasiri. Salote also admins the Instagram page Gems of Naitasiri, where she shares wonderful bits about their culture, their dialect, and ways of life. Secondly, we have Luisa Matatolu, Luisa will be spearheading the MAUK Fijian Language Week project, and she will be telling us more about that project later on. Thirdly, we have Naturanga Natalatala, Nalisiles Nimbosekoviti, and Kenabanua Nivengara Vembolatangane, Talatala Nimilote Rokotoro, Nakabale Talatala. And lastly, Uranga ay sausaw vo ni Banua o Lalangabesi, Nandra iho iwang ni Uranga tu Ivakau, Ratu Glanville Lalabalavu. Bulare Ratu Vinapavalevu. We're now going to asking the panelists to introduce themselves. Similar to last week's session, we'll be asking them to answer 2 questions. First one, tell us about yourself. And number 2, if you could invite one ancestor to join our discussion, who would it be and why? And if we could ask you to work in the order of having Luisa go first, Salote, Talatala Nimilote, then Ratu Glanville. Naka.
Bulavanaka, everyone. Bulavanaka na dango Luisa, tamanilo matatolu, au Marama ni taruko adidia meilau, au wasara ki sopo tawhahau, tonga matanisinga. Au wakawati ki na salonarunga, ki mbabu, ko wakaitiko e Inverness, i Scotland. I moved to the UK in 2012. But I was born and raised in Fiji, and I moved to Tonga when I was 16. And then I didn't move back till I was about 25, 26. If I could have a chance of inviting someone to be here tonight, I would have loved if my father was able to join us. My father died when I was 15, while I was still in high school. And just for me, personally, I would have loved to have him see where like I've been and how I've adapted and like how I've also taken on my mother's culture in addition to my Fijian culture and in speaking both languages as well. That's it from me. Naka.
Naka na nango Salote sauturanga au maneleni somakia anetike no nandara walu sana neta siri au wasui kumi verata tailewu au wakawati na korone within neta siri. I moved to the UK in 2017, so just been here for about 3 years now. Who would I invite? It would have to be my my great-grandfather, who is named after my brother. One of the main reasons is because my grandfather died when my father was very little, so we don't know a lot about him. The reason why I choose my great-grandfather is because when I look at the Volnikaumbula, the first entries were done in around 1926 or 1936, I forget the correct year, but he was around 30 years old at that time. And interestingly, even though he was in his 30s, there's no record of his father in the VKB. There's a record of his mother, but his mom was written as being married to her second husband. So there's no record of my great-grandfather or my great-great-grandfather. So that line beyond my great-grandfather is altogether missing. So that's why I would think I would invite him to shed more light on that part of our history for my family, for my for our lineage. Thank you.
Binaka ni mbuli binaka na dangunga o Nimilote Rokotoro mai na korotadi na tikino noda na sanorewa ka ubostal ngai tadi ubostal ngai tadi bati kuna lubi kirewelewa au kitobo tikitungo stoke sawo tungo lima nembaki wa vingarabe na matibalu served in the Royal Engineers au vingarabe tiko na kada bakai tal ebolimbula. I'm working as a hospital chaplain at the moment. It's been coming up to 15 years since I arrived in the UK. I'm currently finishing my my master's in Master of Arts in Theology with Chester. If there was somebody that I would like to invite to be part of this panel, or who I would invite to guide and to inspire me in the dialogue and the discussion tonight, I think it would be my mother. She was someone that not only said things and taught me things about the culture and my heritage. She was the one as well who showed me how to do it and how to carry it out. And that is something that I miss so much. And it's been 4 years this month. The beginning of this month, it's been 4 years since she passed away. And I'm so glad for all the things that she has done for me. And for me to be part of this panelist tonight, it's a great honor. I'm both excited and startled at the same time. Naka.
Na wale isa mbulu vina natura ng Marama na duro ng mga leo kikimni na warong to kumai au warita ka mandangana buno na totomanda na tango Glanville Lalabalavu au tabutu mai na koro somsom ina sana waturang o ta konrobe au basu ina koro talang somsom number 2 ina ya no ngau ina sana lo mai viti au wati na ina turang mbau ina sana televu ka usama ilewa na toka na mate walu ngoka ni roto toka na rosa vulkan to nembaki na to tong medicine dendai sembi bono sarmai na nonda bono viti na nika dio so vulka dio o mai ngara toka na mate walu dole wawe na infantry nimberna yo te vitu nembaki no kupin karabi na infantry usama ninga indewa na mate walu mate sau kina royal engineer meta toka mai na ngoka. Na pamatal matanga ni ko pertene na bukuni non tatungangan na biliutaki. So in terms of ancestral that I would invite in this dialogue, I pretty much would invite both my parents, my father and mother, because I am who the offspring of or the byproduct of their upbringing. And where I am today is purely because of their upbringing. And on a level basis of my youth till now, I would also invite the late Mr. Ratusemi Serwakula, who has been an inspirational impact in my life as a youth, having to grow up in a school far, far away from the city life, which I went to Queen Victoria School. And I was fortunate enough to be gracing in his leadership for the few years that he served as principal at Queen Victoria School, where he embedded the richness of knowing your roots, knowing your heritage and the identity of you as a Itoke, and also cherishing those cultures that will make you stand out in your identity no matter where you are, as we are experiencing now being in UK. Now, Luisa.
Luisa, Salote, tal Nimilote Rokotoro, Nabalibum do Wewase, Amundo may 11 hum Abipasahani Arnabnihua. Moving on to the next part of our session, as we are all aware, there was a wonderful session put on by our young people last week, which was moderated by Simon Mealy, who was joined by Brittany, Pauliasi, Tico, as well as, so it was a wonderful session, and they passed on 3 key points that they thought would be good for us to start off our discussions with. So the first one was around language. And something that was discussed about language from the youth session was that for those whose children know how to speak the language, keep encouraging them to do it, because they will be grateful for it later on in life. For those whose children don't know how to do it or speak the language, begin to encourage them to speak it and uplift them even if they make mistakes. And I was wondering if I could just get some brief thoughts on this, probably beginning with you, Luisa, as language is something up your department, before we move on to the other panelists.
Vinakafilo. I'll take it from perspective of me as a child, because myself and my husband, we don't have any children ourselves, but this is something I'm always talking to my brothers about, for my nieces and nephews. But for me as a child, I really agree with the sentiments brought on by the first session, by the first dialogue, by the youth, because I grew up as in Fiji with Fijian as my first language, and this is just even within Fiji itself. We moved to Lotoka. My father was working for Fiji Sugar Corporation, so when we got posted to Lotoka, he put us in this school. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. It's called Drassa Avenue School. It had a lot of expatriate kids in it, so all of a sudden my first language was English, or the language that I would always speak was English, and then we would speak English as well at home. And then and it's because like my sister and I were in school, we were speaking in English with our classmates. We would come home, we would speak in English, and my parents would just continue speaking in English to us. But we were only there for about 1.5 years. Now children, one of the things they say, children are very resilient and they absorb things quite quickly and they keep it, like they retain it. So keep in mind that I would have been about 6, 7, going on 8. From Lotoka, my father moved us to, well, the FSC moved my father to Rekaraki. And when we were in Rekaraki, my father put us in Rekaraki Methodist School. And when we were there, because my sister and I kept on speaking in English, they put us, like we have vernacular classes in primary school. Like you have Fijian, Hindi, Urdu, like in Fiji. So they didn't know what to do with us. They put us into English 2, they called it, because we would always speak in English. We weren't speaking in Fijian anymore. But my father, he realized this quite quickly. He was on the PTA association, and he asked them to put us back into vernacular, like Fijian. And like for me personally, I found it quite a challenge to sort of like relearn the basics, like Fijian alphabet, and but then like it stayed with me, like so then I got it back. And then fast forward, just to relate to my brothers, like when my mother moved us to Tonga, they were 7, 9, and 11. They only spoke Fijian and English, but they absorbed the Tongan language, then they forgot Fijian. They were there until they were about, say, 19, 20. But when they came back to USP and like staying amongst Fijians back in Fiji, hearing the Fijian language all the time, this is what linguists call learning by immersion, being in it all the time. It came back pretty quickly for them, to the point that my youngest brother, who was the youngest, when we went to Tonga, is kind of like losing the Tongan. Like he speaks like Fijian more fluently now. So yes, so like, I wholeheartedly agree. If your children speak Fijian, also interestingly, like just borrowing from our neighboring Pacific Islanders, from the Tongans, we always say that you speak your vernacular language at home, because English will be taught in school. Like, don't worry about the children not being able to pick up English or not being able to speak in English when they go to school, because they'll be taught that. And Tongans seem to take that across. Even when they're living overseas, they will always just speak in Tongan at home, because children can, even up until like children go to school, because children can always just go and speak in English in school and get taught in English. Yeah, that's just sorry, some of the examples and thoughts I had on that. I would encourage, people to speak to their children, just even if you're speaking it, children will absorb it. Yeah.
It does remind us of that point, that while we have the privilege of growing up in that sort of learning, in the immersion of the culture, of the language, it is different for young people growing up in the UK now. So yeah. I guess that point on language, to the other panelists. Please feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts to share before we move on to the other key points that the young people had shared with us.
I think one of the key points to address here is we as the generation that we are in this dialogue, and also those that there will be on next week. The key thing that we have to remember about our daughters and our sons who were participating last week when they were emphasizing about the language is we need to recognize that there is a difference of a change that is evolved from our time to their time. And recognizing that change, we need to also understand how we can utilize that change to bring about the correct way of teaching, the correct way of embedding that culture, and the linguistic that most of them have highlighted. They were somehow, I think it was Tico that was addressing that because their parents created a rule within the family that allowed them to only speak the Fijian language within the family. It has enabled her to grow in her Fijian dialect to be able to speak it as well. So for this dialogue alone, everything that I will discuss from my end, I will always discuss it from my experience and from my side of the life. And please forgive me if some of the things that I will share might offend some of you listeners, but it's only the things that I will relate personally to my life. And I hope that it will share light to some of you listening in today. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and she also understands me talking back to Fijian back to her, but she sometimes responds back mostly in English, and sometimes she does a little bit of Fijian. But for me as a parent, I've understand that like the environment that she has grown up in is more suited in mostly she's at school, and that's where she spends most of her time. And I think for us as parents, it is crucial and it is important that we have an impact to still share some of our morals and values in our linguistic language in the Fijian dialect to our sons and daughters, wherever it may be, in the house or whenever we are sitting down sharing our weekend with our friends and families from far away. At least we are still sharing something that they will listen to, because the environment that they are, the more the environment that they listen to Fijian language, the better that they pick up some of the things. But we cannot change them into like a coloring book where we color them so that they become like what we want them to be. The best thing we can do is try to recognize the change that has happened to them, but still try to embed that Fijian culture in the linguistic by talking to them whenever we can.
I would just like to share part of my experience as well with the issues raised and the thoughts being raised by the young people last week, and I think it is taking into in true consideration that this is one of the most important key issues as we deal with our whole culture. And I think two words spring up to my mind. I think it's the nature and the nurture of how we embed culture in our everyday life. Now, I mean, transferable, we can impact their lives on faith, on education, to be good in academia and things like that. But I think in asking themselves, and it is a true question that is being raised at this moment across ethnic groups and across races, and it's the identity of who they are and who I am. And I think it's the nature. And I think what Ratu has said and what Luisa has said, and most of us will agree on, and I think it's the nature and the nurturing which starts at home, and it's creating the safe space of being holding the talanoa or the dialogue back at home. And I think, and I believe with my children and family background, I think part of it is sometimes they will say the things wrong. And I've heard a similar story when I was down in Plymouth on my preaching plan. And it was the same issue that was raised from the 212 who came in the 60s. And I heard a similar story saying that one of the sons of those that came earlier before us shared the same sentiment as well, that I mean, he regretted that he couldn't learn Fijian when he could have been. But we couldn't fault anyone at that time. But I think it is a stepping stone and a learning lesson for us to take into consideration about the issues that are being raised right now about our young people. And I think it is a good step. And I think we are heading in the right direction as parents, as carers for our young people, and also in trying to find the right tune and finding the right balance. Because one example I could say is we love to laugh at mistakes. And I think some of the things that these young children, young people raise at this moment in time, we don't need to do that because that is some of the barriers that we create ourselves as a culture or as a race or as a joke of the day because it's a way of life in our lifestyle. But I think back to the issues being raised, I think it's creating the safe space of Talanoa and the nurturing space of where we can find the right tune and the right topic to be discussed about language. And it's a good topic to be discussed together, take into consideration about the culture and who we are as our identity. Minaka.
So the second point that was raised by the young people that was passed on for our question today is around, I guess, a point raised by Ratu Glenn, and that is about embracing the duality that they have. And I guess the duality is bigger for them compared to our generation, because I guess more of their life is spent here and their social cues and their points of reference are more English than I guess it would be for our generation. So just to elaborate on that point of embracing the duality, it was mentioned that we can't expect individuals who have spent more of their life away from Fiji to know everything, but embrace what they do to uplift. Duality is not easy and cannot be changed, but we need to encourage and support our culture where we can. So that was the point raised, and I wonder if anyone had any burning thoughts or comments to share on that before we move on to the next or the last point that was brought up in the youth panel.
I think I'll jump on this first because it's something of my passion. My previous project on my undergraduate degree was something that I talked about third culture kids, which I carried on into my postgraduate studies about hybridity culture, about embracing the hybridity culture. And I think when we explore and when we dissect this word about hybridity, I think it's a fusion of the development of things that comes together into existence to be a whole thing, a new thing. And I think it's something that we need to embrace as parents. And I think it's something that we need to learn as well, because it's not something that is, well, it's normal to other people, to other cultures, but for us as minorities, as a culture that is that have migrated to work and to find life and to find a future here, I think this is something new, a new topic and a new concept that needs to be digested very well and taken to proper consideration with the young people in mind as well.
Lotte, did you wanted to share anything on that point in particular before we move on?
I think, adding on to what Latal said, I think it's basically comes down to applying understanding. Our culture was changed when we were colonized. It was distorted a bit, yeah, from what it was originally. So has always been change coming in throughout the years. So what's happening now with you know, with people people not being able to speak Fijian, or they speak more English than Fijian. To me, it's not new. It's something it comes about with change, and I think the challenge is on us who do speak Fijian or our dialects fluently. The challenge is on us to apply understanding to that change. I think a lot of our youths, especially, or those who don't speak Fijian fluently, are, you know, they're demeaned, or they're made fun of because they can't speak it fluently. We're all aware of that. I think that's something that maybe in you know, in our you know, church groups, or even our own choral meetings, that's something maybe that could be addressed, where we can all apply understanding to each other, because I think that's how we can help each other more, to help especially the youths, because I see from the conversation that was held last week, two of them said that they knew Fijian fluently, and then when they came into the UK, they had to learn English. I think we judge people too quickly. Like, as soon as we see someone from, oh, he lives in the UK and they've got some kind of accent, and we automatically think this person doesn't know how to speak Fijian. You know, but we don't know the background, like how they shared last week, which was very eye-opening for me, how they came in knowing their dialects fluently, or their Fijian fluently, but then that was lost a bit because they had to learn the language of their new country. So I think the basis of this is applying understanding, especially from those of us who do speak Fijian very fluently.
Nakalote. And the final point that was carried across from the youth panel was around communication. So all participants reflected that where they learned about their identity and culture is where older generations actively spoke to them and shared. So I guess in this situation, we would be the older generation, or the ancestors in the context that we now find ourselves in. And I guess one of the questions we would explore is how we are communicating things around our culture and identity, because we learned in a very different setting to where we find ourselves now. And the question is, how are we going to then pass it on in our new setting?
Very much, Philo Nakwalewe. So communication is the key link that links knowledge to understanding. You know, if we don't communicate well, the understanding piece will be lost, and somehow we will treat the subject in a way that fits only the level of the basis of the communication that you've received. Going back to during our ancestral days, there was how we've learned our ethnicity or our heritage was only by two means. First, it was what's spoken verbally by our forefathers to our grandfathers, having to sit down and listen to them in our Talano session. And second is everything that was scribed in black and white by us reading it and understanding that there was a phase that took place and a change happened. So with that knowledge in mind for what we have obtained as the generation now, using those two contexts, we as parents, as the communicator, we are the ones that needs to then carefully communicate a language that the youth will understand and be able to grasp and practice it. Because if we, going back to what I referred to earlier, if we are teaching them the way that we think that we need to be taught, it's a totally different ballgame to them in the world that we're living in now. So as what Salote had mentioned, we need to embrace the change, understand how we can communicate better so that the youth will understand. So I believe There is a saying that is, home is the best institution. So everything needs to start from an origin, and everything starts from home. To have a better community, you need to have a better home. So when we trace things back, we'll have to look at the family. And I think we, offline when we had this discussion, Philo, I mentioned about the 4 types of the lifestyle that we've lived now as Fijians. The very first one is the person that grew up in the village. He did everything from learning about his heritage, his roots, the tradition, the culture. So we can say he was the stereotype Fijian way. And there was those that were born in cities, in Lautoka, Suva, yet they were not brought up in the village, but they had an understanding of where they come from, you know, what cultures they embedded in their own different dialects, you know, in their own different, the 14 provinces that we belong to. And then the third one was the change had happened. Fiji became a multicultural, multiracial country. So there was embrace of Fijians where we then diversified. And then you have a different type of Fijian way of living where people speak more English or a mix of Fijian and English. And these are the different types of lifestyle that we must not forget that Fiji has become now. You know, during the pre-colonial period, yes, it was all Fijian related, and it was a big taboo that you speak a broken Fijian language, yeah, in that era there. But because we are now living in a point where we are accepting change, it is crucial that we can then at least pass on this communication of how best to nurture our kids, our children, in a way that at home is the very foundation. We can embed this teaching to teach them, you know, small things. Because the other thing as well, it takes a village to raise a son or a daughter. So in our small communities where we gather around, in our small units, we as parents, it is our duty to emphasize the correction to our nephews, to our nieces. Tell them, look, this is the way that the Fijian way is done in this way. So we're teaching them and educating them and correcting them at the same time so that they will understand whenever they go to the next gathering, they would understand, oh, I need to say chilo when I'm going across, you know, a member of a group sitting there. I can't just run around and hop from one chair to another chair. You know, and these are the things, the smaller things, that the basic things that if we try to emphasize that to our youth now and our children that are growing up, we won't lose our culture or our heritage, because it's, where I say it, unfortunate. We are at a place that if we don't embrace this change, and if we don't teach our young ones the right way and the correct way, and be able to nurture them, and I'm sorry to say, in the next 10 years' time, they will lose all this. Okay?
I guess we'll to the guiding questions. And the first one being, can you briefly share with us your experience of living in the UK as a Fijian, and whether or how you have held on to your culture and identity, and what have been some barriers? I was wondering if we could start off with you, Lotte.
So this is like the third year that I've moved to the UK, so it's not very long. How have I held on to my cultural identity? I found this an interesting question because it made me think. like I've never had to think about holding on to my identity, because it's such a big part of me. It's like just part of my everyday life. I speak my dialect every day. I'm connected to my parents, obviously through technology. So I've never, it's not something that I've actually had to think about how I hold on to my identity. I think this is quite different from other people, especially for parents who have children who were born here. In terms of barriers, I think the only barrier for me that I could identify is not being able to participate in cultural, or traditional events like like how you would if you were back in Fiji. I think Luisa had said learning by immersion. I think sometimes when we are away from things like that, we tend to sort of forget how things are done, and that is something that I am weary of. That because I'm away from home, and I haven't, even though I connect to my parents, I talk to them almost every week, but not being there physically is, I think, could be a potential barrier for me. Could potentially cause me to sort of lose some of that kind of that knowledge from it, from being actively involved in those things. Yeah.
That makes sense, because going back to, the initial thoughts on how we learned, and we learned experientially,
Yes.
for the boys, they learned sitting down, listening to the sevu being done by their fathers, their uncles, having a few practice runs, probably getting a growling or two in the process before you perfected it. For us, being around the naus and the bumbus, taking part in the tevunimbe, all that. We learned it in the experience of doing it. Whereas I guess that can be a barrier, as you had mentioned. Here in the UK, we probably don't have access to the experience as much as we did in Fiji, and maybe it would be a conversation of creating the opportunity for those experiences to take place for the sake of passing it on. And I was wondering if maybe the other panelists would have any thoughts to share on this. Please feel free to jump in if you want to.
I think we have the opportunity. I think it's just about actually making the connections. Like Ratu Glanville said, communication. So like some of the things that we're, we're not talking about our generation. And, Philo, I remember telling you once that I felt like, and this is exactly what Ratu Glanville said, I feel like our generation is what's kind of like holding this very thin thread together, and if we're not careful, we're going to lose our language. And I will always be a language champion, because to me, knowing the language meant I was dialed into my culture, and that's the way I always explain it to people. When you learn your language, you know exactly what's happening in any setting. But I kind of digress there. For opportunity-wise, we're doing things here in the UK. This is prior to COVID. It might come back after COVID. When we do, say for birthdays, or like if we have a chief guest that comes, we host a high commissioner or member of the royal family, or in the military. And I think the opportunity is there for when we do these things, like we just say, like that's the opportunity to explain what that is and why we do it and what goes into that. It's not just like some mat that we conjure up and put over there. There's like some levels to it, yeah. So that's like the opportunities are there it's the communicating of it now, like, you know, now we're getting like more aware that, okay, so we've heard the youth, we need to now create those opportunities, like to make sure these things happen. And like Glanville had already said as well, like it's just small things, you know, like small things. Like for me, sometimes when I'm speaking to my friends' children, especially the youth, the young people, if they're talking about something here in the UK, I will either like say to them, oh, you know, in Fijian, that's called this, this, and this. And then you explain why, like, it's called this, this, and this. And then we do it this way, you know, like, and it's just because for me, now segueing into like answering that question, like, what connects me to my identity, or for me, it's my language. You know, I'm very conscious of the fact that I, you know, like, I know my language. I try and read content in Fijian, everything, you know, like I can spend hours like researching articles online, reading like you know, the Ministry of Whitoki Affairs had like all these old Ilalakai PDFs that you can find, and it's all in Fijian. I can just sit and read it. Like, I don't read it's maybe like 5 years old, but to me it keeps it alive. And I speak Fijian to my husband, but I don't get to use it as often because some of the postings that we've had, we've just been like one of 3, 4, 5 families, so we don't, you know, we don't get to use it as much, so we don't like songo, and you know, like, and you'll just be speaking Fijian from the beginning to the end. But yeah, like for me, it's my language. I like to like to keep speaking my language. And then just as an aside there, I watched this video that FBC TV was interviewing Simeone Sevundrendre, and he was talking about the question that was posed to him was, how do we preserve our language? And he said, which kind of captures what some of the panelists have said before me, he said, you don't preserve the language will always change. You safeguard it. So part of safeguarding it is using it so that it doesn't die out. Yeah.
I think, Philo, in the context of what Luisa has mentioned there, opportunities. When we talk about opportunities, let's look back at the two key things with opportunity. One is the identity, followed by the way of life, the habit. Okay, so we come from a Christian country, and we understand that when God created something, He edifies it and makes it beautiful. Yeah, so He created everyone different. When we were made as Fijians, we were clothed with the culture, the language, the lifestyle, the way of living, and all this makes us unique and different from every other human being in this world, or race, or culture. So when we recognize that and we safeguard that, the culture itself presents an edification that makes us stand out. From a military perspective, I've seen so many of my peers, brothers, who were given honorary status from Her Majesty the Queen, or from the royal family, where the very tradition is when they just kneel to the ground and do the zombo, and then do zombo. That is, you don't teach that. It is embedded in you. It is something that you grew up and understand that. And when you do it naturally, the whole world sees it as, wow, that is beautiful. Even those of portfolios, when they come to take up their post as high commissioners, I will see them in their great Sulu, and they will go into the Buckingham Palace, shake hand with Her Majesty the Queen, and they will always take a knee down, and they and that is the mark of respect, which I say it's something that is embedded in us, which is it's nothing that you don't learn about it. It is part of you. And what Luisa said there, the thing that we have to then use this as opportunity is no one else can be like you. No one else can copy our culture. No one else can take away this culture, but it's ourselves that can make us lose that culture. And if we don't teach this to the younger generation, as an example, when I was posted in Cyprus, there was a family there that had their 2 sons. And when we came to their house for the first time, I was deeply honored and shocked at the same time of the gratitude of how I saw their sons perform the Sebu Sebu. And they presented it in their dialect, not perfectly spoken Fijian, but they understood the processes there because their father taught them how it's done. Yet they might not have done it perfectly in the Fijian dialect, but at least they have something that their father have taught them that is going to be ingrained through their life forever. And those are the small things, you know, like for example, for our women of today, going to perform the first-born child of a family. Normally, it's a woman thing to go and do the mark of respect, where you take these gifts. And what better way is when you can take your daughters with you and tell them, we only do this to the firstborn. However, in our culture nowadays, we're doing it to every born child that has come through. And these are the things that we need to then, as well as recognizing things, try and correct it in a manner so that the authenticity is always there. It's the authenticity that we need to safeguard. Because once we lose the authenticity of our culture, I'm sorry to say, it is just a display for tourism, you know. And that's the one thing I champion, and it saddens me that sometimes we as Fijians, we've performed so many things that is just for show to the greater public, but the real authenticity of how it is done is never championed. And it's a thing that, for me, I always try to discuss this with my peers to say, okay, if we do this next time, I'd rather do this correctly, because I know if it's being televised back in Fiji, if I am doing a ceremony in Rakonrove culture, and if I do it wrongly, when my father sees it back in Fiji, he will pick up the phone and he will tell me, why have you done it that way? It's wrong, okay? So if my father can do that to me here, it's also our duty to also help our next generation to teach them the correct way. I had the opportunity that I think I just want to bring to the point that you've stressed today.
I think I share the same feelings with all the other panelists, and I think it's being genuine and being authentic at the same time as well. And I think honesty is a key thing in here, in trying to share and trying to teach the culture and the identity and the teaching of how we are raised up as Fijians. And what Ratu has said, and Luisa and Lotte as well, it's about, I mean, sharing that identity and being genuine at the same time. Because I think from my personal experience, I've got 4 girls, and I think, I don't know if any other parents share this with me, and living in this big country, I think it all comes down to choices. And I think some of the parents, and it was one of the thoughts that came to my mind, I think, should I teach them the Fijian way of life, or should I teach them the new way of life? I think when we live in this great nation, and I think with so many choices and all the liberal views, and I think the fear that comes behind that is, what should I do, or what should I teach my children? in enhancing and bridging the gap and taking their identity forward as well. I'm so lucky here as at home that me and my wife, we communicate in our dialect, not only in the Fijian language, but we communicate in the Rewan dialect. And I mean, it takes time. It takes time. You know, I mean, at one point I thought I would lose it because I think what every parent would say, I mean, especially Fijian parent, you ask so many questions. And I think so many parents burned out on that. So many are giving up on teaching the culture and the language and the tradition because children will be children. And one thing I learned is children ask 180 questions a day. And I think, and I think one of the things that parents are giving up already, especially Fijian children, and the perception that we have as Fijian parents is either we don't want to answer what they are truly asking, or because it's too much for them at the time for them to know, or it's because a lack of knowledge from our side as well. But I'm so lucky here at home because I thought that I would have that I've lost it at a point. But now my older is starting to pick up on the Fijian language because we speak language at home. And on the other side is not only we speak language, but in church. And the communities that that are in the communities, church and other Fijian gatherings, where children pick up on these simple things. They might not ask you in where the songo is happening, but they could come back home and they could ask you the question, Mom, Dad, why is it done that way? And I mean, the last time we were in one place, we saw it this way. So why is it being done this way? And I think it's that moment in time, which is crucial, that we sit down and we talk with them, we have a proper dialogue. And I think it takes patience, it takes commitment, and it takes trust as well, that the children know that, I mean, Mom and Dad is not saying things that they don't know. They're probably sharing what they know and the knowledge behind that as well, and the passion, and I mean, and the joy that comes with that teaching. And I would like to say that that's how I keep my heritage and the culture here at home and in the church as well. And the children are starting to pick that up as days go by. And I'm so glad. And I'm so happy for my daughter because, I mean, she's 14 years old and she's starting to speak the language. What Ratu has said, it could not be perfect the first time, but I mean, practice makes perfect. And that's what, I mean, what we know.
I guess this brings back the point raised by the young people. It was very clear that the hunger to learn and to practice the identity is there, the pride is there. It's a question of whether we have the patience to teach it and pass it on, and how we communicate that across, and that we have to figure out as our generation. Just because time is catching up on us, I'll move on to the next question, and I ask that our answers are very brief. And the next question is, what do you think are two key parts of our culture that is important for us to pass on to the younger generation? And what is the way that we can do that? So what do you think are two key parts of our culture that we need to pass on, whether it's a traditional practice or it's a principle? So at least two examples and a way that we can pass that on to the younger generation within the UK context that we now find ourselves in. So maybe if we start with you, Ratu Glenn, then Luisa, then Lotte, and then Tal Nimilote, please.
Philo. Personally, to myself, one of the two things that is to identify of how I can pass on something to the next generation is for us is basically home is the best institution to teach and nurture and pass on our culture, our the change and everything. So if we at home can do our bit to teach our young ones, help them understand, give time to them, and also allow time to work through their changes in their life, then that will be the first institution that will create that safeguard of our culture for the next generation and the next generation. And the second thing is, as what I've mentioned before, is the authenticity. If we stay true to the real thing, that real thing, in an analogy, let me just say for an example, one of the things that my father mentioned in one of his speeches, he said, when you take a fish, and divide it into three parts, the head, the body, and the tail, and you placed it inside its natural habitat, which is the water, you will see how magnificent, how majestic the fish moves around the water, because that's its true environment and everything is intact. So to bring that in the context of what my point is, when we set ourselves the right goals, the right ways, and the right teachings, therefore we make sure that we as parents teach our kids the correct teaching and the authentic teaching, everything becomes marvelous and beautiful in how it's displayed, not at our time, but at their time when they then become the future fathers and mothers. They will then pass on this to their generation and so forth and so forth. And even so, it becomes a tradition that is never lost. And that's where I stand with my 2 points of how I can pass on my knowledge to the next generation. Vinaka.
Vinaka Filo, for me, I would probably say language and Naitobo, like our what we do as Fijians, what sets us apart, what makes us unique, and like Ratu Glenn had said earlier on, like that's God has birthed us as Fijians. We, this is who we are. It's and we're unique. Like in the whole world, there's only like 0.00006 out of the 7 billion that speak the Fijian language. So I would say, 1 point, probably just 1.1.5, just the language. And I would, for myself, probably use my just probably my knowledge to teach the younger generation or anyone who wants to know about our language, to speak the language. And because to me, I always just think that once you speak your language, you can sort of get everything else will just come. You will listen and absorb because you understand the language. You can take it in. You understand exactly what's going on in any situation. You read and you know your history. You listen to the radio or you listen to anything that's been broadcast, and it's in our language, like in Wasawagaviti, or what they say, Itauki language, and you will understand. So like if I can connect you, like I know there's like parents, and some people are commenting there, that they're now realizing that they need to do this, like just as we've been discussing this evening, to teach their children. Just I guess connecting people to the right resources and people to help them do what it is that they're wanting to do, to safeguard the Fijian language and the culture and everything that comes with it. Like my second point, which is the Nanondi Tobo, like what sets us apart. That's it.
Same thing again, language, like Luisa has said. It's such a huge part for us, language. Yeah? I read in an article, which was written 10 years ago. I was sharing this today with my friend, that Fiji has about 300 communal acts, which are in danger of being lost. And about 30 of this is from my own province, Naitasiri. Interestingly, from that article, it says that even the Bawan dialect is in danger because the standard Fijian is now taking over, and that includes, I think, the Fijian that's also mixed with English. I don't know how true that article is, but that was written 10 years ago. Maybe those of you who are more well-versed in this can probably correct me. But yeah, that's why I think language is such a huge part of us passing on our culture, our tradition to the next generation. For me, my dialect is so important to me. I love speaking in my own dialect, never mind the Bawon or the standard Fijian, but because I communicate so much to my family and to my husband in my own dialect, that's why to me it's so important. Another part that I would say that would be a key thing to pass on is our practices. Some practices are, you could say, are sort of like non-spoken. You know, it's just like a culture, how it's generally understood, but it's not really spoken. So, you know, even some of those things, it needs to be communicated to the next generation. How to communicate it? I would say we've got social media now, which is so huge and so much a part of our lives already, especially we see the importance of it now with the whole coronavirus. This is how we communicate now, through Zoom meetings and etc. I'll just bring up again, I run a page on Instagram. It's called the Gems of Naitasiri. I started this page in 2018, a year after I moved here. Initially, I thought to just share photos and videos from my own province, because ever since I can remember, my parents are always taking us to the village. We live in Suva, but the trip to the village is only an hour and a half or so. So I wanted to share that on that platform on Instagram, just to put it out there. Most of my posts are based on my own village and my own Tikina, where I'm from, Nandarwakawalu. But I share it because even though they are slightly different dialects within Naitasiri, maybe the practices can be sort of similar. So that's one of the reasons why I share it. And I've been running it now for more than a year. And you know, some of the feedback I get from that has really motivated me to keep sharing, because I see young people send me messages saying that they don't speak, they're from Naitasiri, they don't speak the dialect well, but they learn a lot from what I share. And so, you know, it motivated me to share basic information. I think that's been talked about in this forum, sharing basic information. So I started sharing that, like, how do I address my paternal grandmother? How do I address my maternal grandmother? Very basic things, common words and phrases that I would use at home, or you know, videos that other people have created of the province, and I share that. And one of the recent posts that I made was of a man who was speaking in his own dialect of Nambombudo. And I posted that because he was speaking on camera in his own dialect, and they added subtitles. And I shared it because sometimes we'd rather speak in English when we're speaking on camera, when, you know, our videos are being recorded, or you're being interviewed by Fiji One or FBC. We'd rather speak in English, and we don't want to speak in our own dialect. So I shared that because I was like, you know, why not? Why can't you speak in your own dialect and let them translate it for you? Let them add English subtitles to it. I just wanted to bring that up because we're saying how do we pass it on to the next generation? Why don't we make it normal by, you know, speaking Fijian? Why don't we make speaking our own dialect normal on social media? When you're interviewed by by the media, why don't we speak our own dialect? I see someone like Joe Rokotoro, who's a rugby player. One of the videos that was circulated on social media, he was speaking in his own dialect, and they added subtitles to it, and I found that really, really interesting, and I loved it. Yeah, so I've been running that page, Gems of Naitasiri. I get responses from people who say, this is really good. It's you're helping to keep the dialect alive, and they're learning also about the province as well. And it's also helped me on the other side of it. Philo has been following my page as well, and she's brought up some really useful tips. So it's helped me to even research things about my own province. Things like, how many dialects are there? So that's me contacting Polongereti, asking him questions, etc., and reading books. Philo introduced me to a very interesting one called Disturbing History of Fiji, and I learned so much about where I'm from, my people from Dolo East. So going back into history and helping me to be aware of that and understand, bring that history and to understand what the relationship is like within the province now. So yeah, I think I'm talking a lot, but I just passing on information. I think social media is we should make use of it, and yeah, that's how I've done it. I've been running that page on Instagram.
Nimilote, wonderful. I guess you touched on a lot of important things. One, a new way of teaching our culture, which can be done through social media as we are doing, as well as normalizing speaking in our dialects or in Fijian. And thank you for that. I guess we have on last is Tala Nimilote.
I share the same answers and the thoughts that the other panelists have shared on this forum, and I totally agree on Ratu about the home, which is the best institution, and Luisa about the language, and which Lotte shared some on it as well, and about the Tobo. But I think for me, I think I would like to pass on the embracing the identity of these young people and the children that are coming after us, because with the rise of some hate crime in regards to races, with the rise of the rise of Brexit and the BLM, the Black Lives Matter. And I think it's about asking the question and for us to be facilitators, parents to be facilitators, and I think not to be leaders, because as facilitators, we are participants with them in guiding them and listening to them and developing them, educating and training them. And I think that is where we need to try and embrace them, because this is the question that they are asking, who are they and do they fit in? Because I read an article that Yara Hackenberg, one of the assistant professor in USP, she was here in Edinburgh. She was part of the Pacific Studies in St. Andrews, and she wrote a journal back in 2015, The Cost of Being Fijian in the UK. And along those thoughts in which she shared was, we need to be careful as this current generation of parents and moms and dads, that we don't want our Fijian children to be lost in the wider Fijian community, because of things that have been spoken by other panelists, whether they can speak the language, or they can come and attend the Vingangaravi, or they don't know where to sit, the patriarchal side of things and the hierarchical side of things. And I think we need to embrace their identity, because at this moment, I think with the rise of mental health as well, in regards to children and young people and their self-esteem, which brings in self-hate for these young people, because they, in their minds, and I think it's a burning question. I think with the so many isolation that's going down and the lockdown, and this is the burning question that they are asking: who are they, and whether they do fit in, not only in the wider community of other ethnic groups, but in our Fijian community. Do they fit in with the parents? Because there's so many songs which I go to and I just see all the young people there sitting. I think that is a good avenue where we can train them and educate them. And I mean, and like I said, let's be facilitators and not leaders, because as facilitators, we are participants with them rather than being, I know teaching is a good side, training is a good side, and educating, but let's walk beside them. And the second point that I would like to raise is communication, which I think Ratu and the other panelists have raised about communication and the young people last week. And I mean, the thing that came onto my mind was, I mean, these young people are being educated here, not like us. I think in terms of communication, it's just a one-way system. And I think that is the theory of Aristotle, from the sender to the receiver. And I think, and I believe these children are being educated in this country, and some of them are attending universities, and some of them are taking up this module about communication. And I love the theory that Shannon Weaver said, that communication is from the sender, which is the decoding and the encoding, and then to the receiver. But in between this, there's a white wall, which is a barrier that so many noise and so many things could be missed on these walls. There's so many misinterpretation of things, miscommunication of things. And I love about this this theory about the communication theory about that Shannon Weaver said was, and I think we need to learn this as Fijians who are here in this great land, that they said that no, Aristotle said it's just a one-way system, but communication in this 21st century needs to be, there needs to be a loop back, to be feedback from the receiver back to the sender. Are you sending the right message across? And I think that is where Talanoa comes in, and we are very good at Talanoa. And I think one of the papers that, the article that Unesi Nambombamba, one of the professors back in FNU, and I think she published a paper on Talanoa, and we are very good at Talanoa, like what Ratu Glenn has said, but Talanoa that is culturally appropriate according to how we do Talanoa as Fijians. I mean, Talanoa could be just a chat, could be an informal interview, but Talanoa, let's sit down and communicate in Talanoa with that in mind, of the encoding, the decoding, and the feedback being passed back. And if we are as senders are passing the right message back down to the receiver.
I think you brought up a very important point about identity. And for a lot of us, this whole sense of identity, we start to come into in our early 20s, where these young people are. And I guess at around the age they're going to university, for those who went to university in Fiji or Pacific, I think Lulu, you had mentioned this. We had the privilege of being able to join the Fijian Students Association or the Pacific Students Association. For young people in the UK, you'll be lucky to have you have two Fijians on the same campus. So you don't have access to those kind of associations that sort of help you grow into your identity, in addition to what you learn from home or from your parents and your family. So it really is a whole lot of pressure, I guess, or reliance on the nuclear family or the parents to pass that on, in the absence of every, of the traditional structures that you would have back home, student associations or the clubs and associations that we had back in Fiji. And we do have a bit of it here. And also, like Tala mentioned, I think it's something we notice that when we go to functions, you find young people and the children sort of wandering about, and it might be a missed opportunity. And I guess also touching on what Lotte had mentioned, that there are new ways that we can be teaching, opportunities that we should be taking advantage of. And I guess just as a final question, because we've gone over time, is just one idea from each of you on a new way or an opportunity in which we can be accompanying young people in, I guess, exploring their culture in a more deeper sense.
I think for me, it's about let's build bridges rather than building barriers. Because at the moment, I mean, these young people, I mean, these are two different subcultures within the big Fijian community of culture. I mean, children that were born here, and for an example, I would like to say was when I was in the military, and there was another Fijian who was in the barracks as well, and one of my sergeant came over and said, "Is he really from Fiji?" I said, "Yeah, he's from Fiji." Why? Why do you ask the question? Because he hasn't got a Fijian name, and we need to be mindful of that, because some of our children, they have names that might not be, I mean, identical. They in identity they are Fijian, but names that could be misinterpreted by other ethnic groups. And I think in terms of that, rather than for us, I think it's the observation going forward and things that we need to develop by hearing voices from the group, the younger people, and the groups that are younger than them. And I think we need to build bridges for them to come over and for them to come across confidently, and for them to come over, I mean, knowing that they are fully cared and they trust us as facilitators and parents and teachers as well.
To me, sorry, go on, Salati. I'll sum up.
Just asking about the question again.
Sorry, so just one idea of how we here in the UK can sort of help young people explore their culture deeper. So if it's through workshops, and workshops when, you know, very practical ideas, I guess. If it's like mentioned by Luisa, when we have songos here where there's a chief guest, making a point of bringing young people and passing on that, no, this is why we're spreading the maths. These are the maths we're spreading. So I guess one idea of a practical way we can pass on the cultural knowledge we have to younger Fijians in the UK.
Just to sum up that last question, I believe the one songo that most of the UK Fijian community always participate, where the whole age group comes together, is always Fiji Day. Now, I'm going to challenge us, the Fijians in UK. From my perspective, looking at Fiji Day, so much the focus has been on the emphasis of inviting our chief guests, our line managers, our bosses, where we want to showcase our culture to them. But yet we are forgetting the next generation. So why not we switch the focus on the Fiji Day, that is all the emphasis about our youth and about us, that we create that Fiji Day all about, again, going back to the drawing board and learning things the correct way, the right way, so that they then pick up the right tools to enable them to practice it in the future. And that's the challenge I leave to us viewers for the next Fiji Day. I know COVID is amongst us, but please, let's, because we are mentors, and what Talatala had said, that we are facilitators. Let us then facilitate that change. Let us make that change for the future of our young ones, so that they are not just participating in a function of a Fiji Day that's all about the grown-ups when they enjoy themselves in the after party, and yet the authentic idea of having to celebrate Fiji Day, which most of the time I ask some of the audience, do you really know what Fiji Day is about? Do you understand why we have Fiji Day? What happened during the post-colonial and all this? And a lot of the audience do not understand why Fiji Day. The only thing they remember about Fiji Day is a lot of food and there was a lot of functions.
A lot of music.
Let us change the mindset,
Dancing.
that mindset, to embed something that is more constructive, and that use it as a platform to give that tools to our children so that they can use it in the right way and the right manner.
Can I just add to that? I think that's something that's always been on my mind as well. So I'm really glad that was brought up. I also think maybe we can also go even further to the provincial level. I know over here there's a lot of provincial groupings.
Yeah.
So I think at that level, I think those who are involved in those groupings, the challenge is on them on how, what do they do, what do they talk about, and how they pass on, how they ensure that their own practices within their province is being communicated to those who are younger, those who are coming, those who are still learning, those who want to learn. How is that being passed on within their provincial songos, provincial meetings and events that happen here in the UK? Because at the provincial level, they will be speaking their own dialects. The Biokani will be already very well known, so it would be easier to communicate these things. And for also, and like Talatala had mentioned, for us to build bridges rather than, create more barriers. And I think that can be easily done also at that level, at the provincial level. But another way, because like I said, I run my page on Instagram. Maybe one way is through the Marama Alliance UK is to put out, if there are young people who want to know more about their province or the language, I'd be willing to help. If there's someone from Naitasiri who wants to learn more about Naitasiri, I'm willing to share the knowledge that I have and the things that there are things that I haven't shared yet on the Gems of Naitasiri page because I'm still trying to write things down. So I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to teach someone, maybe my dialect or however I can, whatever they're interested in. Maybe that's something that could be put out through the Marama Alliance UK. For each of us, that each of us could make it available, not just within our, for Fiji Day, but make it available to the young people within our own provinces. Make ourselves available, our knowledge, our experiences, and we can share that however we want, through email, through speaking to them on the phone, video calls. Yeah, that's all.
Nakalote, Glenn.
I would just like to join Dr. Glenn in his challenge as well. That we change the narrative for Fiji Day and let's focus on the next generation. And in saying that, I know most of you would know that I'm also on the Marama Alliance UK committee. So for this year, we are going to actually do Fijian Language Week, which is going to be from Sunday, the 4th of October, running through right up until Saturday, the 10th of October, which is Fiji Day. And we've asked our lovely friends from the Ministry of Pacific Peoples in New Zealand, who run the New Zealand Language Weeks, to partner with us to share our resources and things. So we're going to share the theme, which is Nongo Wasta, Nongo Mambula. So for those of you out there, that's a challenge for you to think about the theme for this year, how you would apply it in your families, to your children, to the next generation. When we put out communication to engage with, with the activities, and I spoke with the Fijian High Commission a couple of days ago on this, that we do not want the Fijian Language Week to finish, and then the next time we're going to have it is Fijian Language Week next year. We need to plan that it, that there's engagement going on between, all throughout the year, and we can do that. We're quite a big number of Fijian community here in the UK now that we can, we can do this ourselves. So yeah, so that's I would really like to challenge people to to change the Fiji Day focus. After what we talked about tonight, what we've heard from our youth especially, and the opportunities that they don't have. Because even for me, when I listened to them last week, I didn't realize that there's certain challenges that even, you know, it's even magnified here, because they are now moving into that space where they're in university and things like that. They're moving away from home, so they're not speaking as much, you know, with the language. They're not possibly attending the gatherings that we have as a community as well. So they're starting to sort of lose the connection. Yeah, which is the, you know, the non-racism. But that's it for me. So.
Can I just quickly say something, Lotte? I think picking up on from all those thoughts being shared across, I think there's a YouTube channel, Dr. T, Talano with Dr. T, Dr. Virisila, Dr. Teresi. Virisila? Teresi. Teresi. Dr. Teresi, and I mean, she runs some very good seminars and classes as well about our culture and about our heritage and about our identity. And I think one thing that Luisa said, it's about consistency, because without consistency, I think complacency will come in. If we lose this, I think complacency will come in. And that's when we will react. I think it's too late. And I think there's something that, like what Lotte said, I mean, play to the resource and use the resources that is available. I think social media is something. And Dr. T has a page on Facebook and a YouTube channel. And I think this opportunity of being locked down at home, I think it gives us every family the opportunity just to sit down and just talk. Just some basic questions. Just raise some basic questions about village, about, I mean, the Naita Siri province are very good at this, about the animal, about the fish, about the tree. I mean, and I think that is something that we need to develop. Because intergenerational, I think that, I mean, it's a very big word and a big avenue as well, because intergenerational comes with interconnectedness, and it comes with the interdisciplinary as well. Regardless of if dad is from Rewa or mom is from Lao, you know, I mean, that hypens up and it fully impacts the identity of the child or the children in the family.
We unfortunately we've run out of time. We've actually gone 15 minutes over our allocated time frame, but I thought I'd just keep the conversations going because it's been so good. We haven't even gone through all of the guiding questions I had prepared for the panelists, but it's been such a great conversation, and I'm excited about, you know, continuing the conversation, that it doesn't end here, and that, you know, continuing to be in touch with you panelists, and as well as the other panelists, the ones that have gone before us and the one next week. So we look forward to that continuing conversation. So thank you very much. I guess I'd like to take this opportunity to just flag that there's 2 more sessions left for the Cultural Resilience series. One is next week, Tuesday, and that's going to be by Fijians in the UK who are 50 plus, so 50 years and older. And then the following week on Wednesday will be a sort of a mashup of all of us, all the different groups that will be talking. It's going to be quite a big group. We're still trying to figure out how we'll organize that into some kind of working manner where we're able to all come together to have a talanoa together with the young people, us, and the 50 plus. And we'll be circulating that in the next 2 weeks. Ano main rahe uberhungali ni komite ni Marama Alliance UK mo may pabinipinah be mundo Ratu Glanville tal Nimilote Salote wahi na vale po mundo lama soli na may nabuhuni be sura ya be hoane na vale mundo may be wase ya mundo be hawe ahi iho ina na sasanga ni songo Marama Alliance UK winaksar vale Thank you very much as well to all our viewers who are tuning in from the UK, from back home Fiji, and around the world. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you have enjoyed this as much as we have.
Naka.
Okay.